I never thought I'd discover that my own husband could betray me so thoroughly, right under my nose. I had been cleaning his office that Saturday morning, the sunlight slanting across dusty papers and empty energy drink cans lined up like little soldiers on the windowsill. Usually, I leave Jason's space alone. He has his quirks. But that day, the mess was impossible to ignore. Stacks of folders, takeout containers, receipts from months ago. My hand brushed against a folder tucked beneath a pile of business books, still sporting their price stickers. And then I saw it. A loan agreement, $900,000. My full legal name, Emma Claire Doyle, was listed as the primary borrower. The signature looked almost like mine, except the middle initial was slightly off. My eyes traced the strokes. The curl I always add to my E was missing. The pressure of the pen varied strangely. My chest tightened, my hands trembled, and I sank into Jason's office chair, gripping the folder as if it were fire. Our house, the one my father had helped us buy, the one he sacrificed his vacation cabin for, was collateral. Everything my family had invested, everything I'd carefully built with him over 6 years, suddenly felt like a ticking time bomb. Jason, my husband, the man I trusted implicitly, had gone behind me, forged my signature, taken a $900,000 loan for his brother's failing crypto business. I had spent hours staring at the ceiling that night, coffee cooling untouched on the kitchen table, replaying every conversation I'd had with him about finances, about Marcus, about his big ideas. How could I have missed the signs, the excuses, the sudden excitement, the hush-hush meetings with his brother? My mind raced. I felt shock, disbelief, betrayal, all at once, yet beneath it simmered a strange calm. I knew I had to act. By midnight, Jason returned from his weekly poker night, laughing about the $200 he had won. He kissed me, oblivious to the storm brewing behind my eyes. I nodded, smiling faintly, masking the truth. I didn't know that by the end of the week, I would have transferred the house entirely into his name, leaving him solely responsible for the debt he had created. And I would walk away, free of his lies. I had learned a terrible truth that day. The people you love most can sometimes be the ones who hurt you the deepest. But I also learned something about myself. I would not be destroyed. I would find a way to take control, reclaim my life, and protect everything I valued. And it all began with that folder, that single, damning piece of paper. I'm 32 now, a senior accountant at a manufacturing firm, with freelance bookkeeping on weekends. Organized, meticulous, practical, traits that served me well in my career and my life until Jason's recklessness collided with everything I believed about trust. Jason was 34, a web designer working from home, once ambitious but steadily losing clients over the last 2 years. On paper, we seemed like a balanced couple, my stability, his creativity. But life has a way of testing even the strongest foundations. We met 7 years ago, in a grief support group neither of us would have chosen if given a choice. Both of our mothers had died in a car accident on Interstate 5. A semi-truck lost control in the rain and hit their car head-on. Jason's mother had been driving, my mother in the passenger seat. The shock of it, the shared void, was what first drew us together. He understood the emptiness I carried in ways no one else could. After our third meeting, we sat in the small cafe across the street, sharing stories of our mothers, of holidays lost, of the bizarre, hollow world that follows tragedy. Within 3 months, we were dating. A year later, engaged. My father never fully warmed up to Jason. He came to the wedding, gave a speech that seemed heartfelt, but I could see the tight line of his jaw, the way his eyes would dart to Jason and then away, as if weighing him against some invisible scale. 6 months after we married, he took me aside for lunch, just the two of us. "Is Jason really working full-time?" he asked casually, as if talking about the weather. "Yes," I said, though I knew he was barely bringing in enough to cover his expenses. He nodded slowly, then changed the subject, but the look lingered. It was the first sign, subtle and quiet, that maybe I had overlooked something. In the first 2 years of marriage, Jason's web design business did well enough. He earned around $40,000 a year. I earned $95,000. I handled the mortgage, utilities, insurance, everything, and gave him $500 a month for personal expenses. He called it humiliating at first. I told him, It's our money. We're a team. He stopped complaining, but I could see the resentment simmer beneath his surface. His brother, Marcus, always around with his own restless energy, never stayed anywhere for long. Tech ideas, side projects, grand schemes, but nothing ever materialized. That's the man Jason would eventually risk everything for, dragging me along without consent. 2 months before I found the loan papers, Jason came home bubbling with excitement about Marcus's real opportunity, a cryptocurrency mining venture. I immediately said no. I'm not risking our house on this, I told him. The electricity, the outdated equipment, the volatile market, it's all a gamble we cannot afford. His face fell. You never support my ambitions, he said. I just want a chance to provide, to prove myself. You already provide in countless ways, I reminded him. I'm not stopping you from trying, but I will not gamble my family's future for a risky scheme. He was silent then, but I should have known. Silent didn't mean defeat. Over the years, I had learned patience, the subtle art of observation. Jason's excitement, his pleading, his quiet plotting. They were all pieces of a pattern I had glimpsed but ignored. Perhaps I wanted to trust too much. Perhaps I wanted to believe love could temper recklessness. But now, sitting in his office that morning, hands shaking over the forged loan documents, I realized how wrong I had been. Trust, once broken, leaves nothing but calculation and cold clarity in its place. It started small. Little anomalies that at first seemed trivial. Missing invoices, hushed phone calls, corners of emails disappearing into unread folders. Jason's office grew cluttered, not with work, but with boxes of receipts and half-baked business plans from Marcus. I told myself I was imagining things. I wanted to believe in him, in us. But the signs accumulated like dark clouds over a sunny day. He began scheduling more meetings with Marcus, closing the office door for hours at a time. At first, I didn't listen. I convinced myself it was professional matters. Yet, when Marcus would arrive at the house, a small smirk of confidence on his face, Jason's demeanor would shift subtly, almost imperceptibly, deferential, nervous, calculating. I remember one evening I found them both in the office, the air tense, voices muffled but animated. Marcus was pacing, Jason seated, nodding, hands gripping the edge of the desk. I knocked lightly, curious. Jason's head shot up. Just, planning a camping trip, he said, forcing a smile. I nodded. I left, but the unease lingered. My mind couldn't dismiss the odd energy between them, the secretive conversations, the way Jason's eyes flicked toward the floor when I entered the room. There were other things, too. Jason had started avoiding certain discussions about finances. When I asked about client payments or bank statements, he deflected. Don't worry about it, Em, he'd say, brushing off the questions with a charm that used to be endearing, but now felt like armor. Even dinner conversations became strategic. He monitored his tone, his words, ensuring I never pried too deeply. I noticed the subtle cracks in his expressions, hesitation before answering, brief flashes of guilt or irritation that vanished too quickly to be real. I began replaying moments I had previously dismissed. The urgency he had shown when Marcus pitched the crypto idea, the veiled frustration at my careful calculations, my insistence on not risking our home, it all made sense now. The pieces fell into place. The whispered phone calls, the sudden excitement over Marcus's big opportunity, the secretive drives to supposed business meetings. My pulse quickened every time I recalled these moments. What had seemed harmless or trivial before now carried a shadow of intent I couldn't ignore. I confided in a close friend once, carefully, not revealing specifics. I feel like something's off, I said over coffee, hands wrapped around the mug, trying to anchor myself. She nodded, giving a sympathetic look. Trust your instincts, Emma. You're usually right. Her words echoed in my mind long after the conversation ended. Even our home life began to feel different. Jason had become distracted, irritable at minor issues, and strangely defensive. I caught him checking his phone more often, ducking into rooms to make private calls. Occasionally, I noticed receipts left out, unexplained deposits in his account, questions I didn't dare ask. Every time I felt a knot in my stomach tighten, a silent alarm I had trained myself to heed. The tension grew gradually but relentlessly, like water seeping through a crack in a foundation. I tried to address it, gently probing. Is everything okay with Marcus's projects? I asked one evening. Jason smiled tightly. Everything's fine, Em. Really, don't worry about it. But the words lacked conviction. I felt the lie in them, the faint tremor beneath the surface. By the time I discovered the loan folder under the books, I wasn't naive anymore. My intuition had been right all along. Jason had been orchestrating a dangerous scheme behind my back. My shock that morning was intensified by a grim awareness. I had ignored the conflict seed for too long, mistaking subtle signs for trivialities, and that lapse could have cost me everything. Sitting there in his office, tracing the forgery on the loan papers with my fingers, I realized that the danger wasn't just the money or the house. It was Jason's willingness to deceive, to manipulate, to prioritize ambition over truth and partnership. The trust we had, painstakingly built over 6 years, had been corroded, one small act at a time, until it was ready to crumble. It was a Saturday morning, like any other, or so I thought. The sun streamed through the blinds, dust motes dancing lazily in the golden light. I was in Jason's office, tidying up what I had long avoided, the ever-growing chaos of his papers, empty energy drink cans, and takeout containers. Months of clutter had piled up on every surface. Normally, I left him to it, respecting his space. But something compelled me to organize it that day, as if intuition itself had drawn me there. As I moved a stack of business books off his desk, a plain manila folder fell free. It had been hidden, overlooked, but my eyes landed on it immediately. My chest tightened in a way that felt like the first punch of a storm. I picked it up and opened it carefully, almost reverently. The first page made my heart stop. A business loan agreement. $900,000. My full legal name, Emma Claire Doyle, was listed as the primary borrower. I froze. My fingers traced the signature at the bottom, the strokes wrong in subtle ways. The middle initial was slightly off. The curl in my E was missing. The pen pressure varied unnaturally, light in some places, heavy in others. My heart hammered, my breath caught in my throat, and I had to sit down. The documents revealed more. Our house, the one my father had helped fund, the home we had shared for 6 years, was collateral. Jason was listed as managing partner, Marcus as chief technology officer for a company called TechWave Solutions, LLC. The loan had already been dispersed. The first payment, $8,000, was due in just 2 weeks. I slid my phone from my pocket and checked our joint account. Nothing. No record of the loan. No deposit of $900,000. My mind raced. Jason must have opened a separate account. He must have orchestrated this entirely without my knowledge. I swallowed hard, hands trembling as I placed the papers back on the desk. I took photos of every page with my phone. Evidence, proof, a lifeline in a storm I didn't yet fully understand. Time slowed as I absorbed the magnitude of what had happened. Every calculation, every risk I had refused to approve, every careful discussion about the house's security, every dollar my father had invested, all had been dismissed by Jason's secretive ambition. The betrayal was visceral. I felt shock, disbelief, and a surge of cold, calculating fury. Hours later, Jason returned from his poker night, cheerful, laughing about the $200 he had won. He approached me casually. "Hey, how's it going? Did you miss me?" "Going." I nodded, my voice even. "Yeah, all good." I masked my inner storm with a calm that fooled him completely. I had to. One wrong word, one misstep, and he could undo everything. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while he slept beside me, unaware. My mind replayed every detail of our marriage, every conversation about finances, every compromise I had made to keep our family stable. I thought about my father, about the house, about the sacrifices he had made. And I thought about Jason, the man I had loved, now revealed as a man who could forge my signature, gamble our home, and lie to my face without hesitation. I made the decision that night. I would not be a victim. I would not be dragged under by his recklessness. I would find a way to reclaim control. My plan formed quietly, methodically, like a chess player anticipating moves 3 steps ahead. I would transfer ownership of the house solely to Jason, make him responsible for the debt he had created, and remove myself from all risk. Only then could I confront him. Only then could I walk away without losing everything I had built. The next morning, I drove to my father's house. He was in his garage, sanding a bookshelf, oblivious to the crisis brewing in our family. I asked casual questions about estate planning, property law, keeping the conversation neutral. My father's eyes lingered on me, alert and perceptive, but I withheld the truth. He would need to be informed carefully when the timing was right. I returned home with a new sense of purpose. Every interaction with Jason became strategic. I kept my phone locked at all times, photos of the documents safely hidden. I continued daily routines, poured coffee with hands that no longer shook as violently, and planned every step. 3 weeks later, after legal consultations and careful maneuvering, the deed transfer was complete. The house was in Jason's name alone. He was now solely responsible for both the mortgage and the $900,000 loan. Jason signed the documents without scrutiny, convinced that he had gained control, unaware that he had also gained sole liability. When the day came to confront him, I was calm, measured. I handed him the copies of the quitclaim deed. His hands shook as he read. "Why? Why would you do this?" he stammered. I looked him squarely in the eye. "Because you forged my signature. You gambled with our home, with everything my family sacrificed, and I will not pay for your mistakes. This house is yours now, all of it, every debt, solely your responsibility." He paced, trying to argue, to negotiate, but the truth was undeniable. The papers, the loan documents, the mortgage, all evidence of his recklessness, stood as a monument to the betrayal he had engineered. And I, Emma, 32, had taken back control of my life. The moment I saw the folder under those business books, I felt the ground shift beneath me. My hands shook so violently that I could barely hold my phone to photograph the loan documents. The reality hit me like a physical blow. Jason, the man I trusted, had used my name without consent to gamble with our home, to create a $900,000 debt that could ruin us. My heart pounded, throat tight, every instinct screaming that I was under siege in my own house. I didn't cry immediately. Instead, I sat in his office chair, eyes scanning each page, trying to slow my racing thoughts. The middle initial in my forged signature didn't curl the way I always did. The pen pressure varied unnaturally. It was unmistakable. Fraud. My chest constricted, stomach twisting. But beneath the shock, a spark of clarity ignited. I couldn't allow panic to dictate my actions. I had to think, plan, act. For hours, I replayed every conversation Jason and I had had over the past months, every disagreement about his crypto venture, every subtle excuse he had given about meetings with Marcus, every moment I had brushed off my intuition because I wanted to trust him. Each memory cut sharper than the last. I realized this wasn't a one-off lapse in judgment. It was a pattern of deception I had been blind to. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, staring at the cup, hands cradling it like it would anchor me. My mind ran through legal possibilities, potential consequences, worst-case scenarios. Could I be held liable for the loan? Would the bank come after me if the business failed? I remembered my father's words from past discussions about joint property ownership. Both names mean both people are responsible for debts attached to the property. The weight of that knowledge made my palms sweat. Jason returned that night from poker, upbeat, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. He waved a crumpled $200 bill. "Can you believe I won this? Just small stakes, but still, $200. He sat down, grinning. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral, matching the tone of the room. I asked about his night, feigned casual interest, all the while calculating my next steps. Every word he spoke, every inflection, every relaxed gesture reinforced the chasm that had grown between us. That night, I lay awake while he slept, tracing patterns in my mind. I thought about the sacrifices my father had made, the down payment, the sale of his vacation cabin, the trust he placed in us. How could Jason jeopardize that? I felt betrayal, yes, but also a growing resolve. I wasn't powerless. I could respond. I could protect myself and ensure he bore the consequences of his choices. The following day, I visited my father under the guise of casual conversation. He was in his garage, sanding a bookshelf, the scent of wood and polish filling the space. I asked about estate planning, property law, hypotheticals about debts and loans. My questions were innocuous, but the intention was clear. I needed guidance, confirmation that I could separate myself legally from any liabilities. He glanced at me, perceptive, but didn't press further. I wasn't ready to reveal the betrayal fully. Returning home, I began taking measures meticulously. Copies of documents were made and securely stored. I created a hidden folder on my phone for photos. I continued acting normal, prepared dinner, watched TV, chatted casually. Jason had no idea that I knew, that the ground beneath him was shifting. I realized my reaction had to be precise. Anger or confrontation without preparation could backfire. Legal advice was essential, evidence critical. Every step from this point would need to be methodical. I began researching lawyers specializing in financial fraud and family law, reading reviews, making notes. By evening, I had selected Patricia Chen, known for her tough and strategic approach. Even as the shock subsided slightly, the emotional weight remained. The betrayal, the manipulation, the threat to everything I valued. Yet interwoven with the pain was a newfound clarity. Jason had made a choice, one that endangered me, our marriage, and our home. Now it was my turn to act deliberately, to reclaim control, to ensure that his recklessness would not destroy the life I had worked to build. That night, I went to bed not as a powerless victim, but as a strategist. Every plan, every step, every future decision would be measured, deliberate, and unassailable. I resolved I would protect myself, reclaim control, and confront Jason on my terms, fully prepared. The storm of betrayal had hit, but I would not be swept away. The days following my discovery of the loan forged in my name felt like walking on a tightrope suspended over an abyss. Every interaction with Jason, every passing glance, every casual remark had to be calculated. I couldn't afford missteps. And yet the world around me seemed determined to intensify the pressure, to test how far I could endure. Marcus became a constant presence. He arrived at the house under the pretense of discussing the cryptocurrency venture, pacing through the living room, phone glued to his ear. Jason, anxious but deferential, followed him, nodding at every point. I overheard fragments of conversation, voices low, urgent. Marcus talked about equipment deliveries and deposits. Jason responded with strained assurances, his tone clipped, defensive. I didn't need to know every detail. The tension in the room, the undercurrent of secrecy, told me everything. At one point, I stepped into the hallway. Marcus froze mid-sentence. We're just, planning a business trip, he said, forcing a casual tone that failed spectacularly. Jason glanced at me, sweat beading at his temple, avoiding my eyes. I nodded slowly, letting them stew in the room's charged silence before retreating. The observation was simple. They were hiding something significant, and I now had proof of their recklessness. Family dynamics added another layer of complication. Jason's mother had always been indulgent toward her sons, excusing mistakes, minimizing responsibility. When I confided, carefully, in my father about potential liabilities and property law hypotheticals, he became more concerned. He asked about Jason's financial decisions, and I deflected with vague answers. His protective instincts flared beneath the surface. He didn't know the full scope yet, but the tension in his gaze told me he was weighing the risk to me and our family assets. Jason himself became erratic. His client list was shrinking, yet he refused to confront reality. Each day brought new stress. Calls from Marcus, emails about deposits, frustration over delays in equipment shipments. One evening, he asked if I could cover a temporary shortfall. My heart constricted. The audacity was breathtaking. I replied evenly, I'm not responsible for your business decisions. You will have to handle this yourself. His face contorted in disbelief, rage simmering behind confusion. Friends who had known us for years started weighing in subtly. One called, casually asking, Is everything okay between you two? You seem distant. Another suggested, Maybe Jason just needs support. He's under a lot of pressure. They meant well, but I sensed the implicit expectation. Compromise, placate, forgive. I refused. Every interaction became a test of patience, a challenge to maintain composure while gathering evidence, solidifying my legal standing, and planning my next moves. The pressure escalated further when I noticed discrepancies in Jason's explanations. He claimed deposits were made for equipment, yet receipts I glimpsed were vague or missing entirely. Promises of returns or deliveries were delayed indefinitely. Marcus's presence only intensified the stress, offering reassurances that felt hollow. I began to realize just how precarious the situation was. The business could fail at any moment, the bank could call in the loan, and Jason's inexperience meant there was no contingency plan. Yet, even amid the chaos, I observed carefully, noting patterns, inconsistencies, and weaknesses. Every defensive glance Jason threw, every exasperated sigh Marcus muttered under his breath, became part of a growing dossier in my mind. I wasn't merely a bystander, I was cataloging, analyzing, anticipating. The realization of control began to crystallize. Though Jason and Marcus were creating chaos, their own missteps provided the path for me to reclaim stability. I also took meticulous steps to safeguard myself. Copies of the loan documents were stored securely, photographs locked in hidden folders on my phone. I researched legal procedures, consulted with Patricia Chen, and kept my daily interactions with Jason neutral, routine, and unremarkable. My outward calm masked the storm within, allowing me to observe without alerting him. The escalation reached its apex one Thursday evening. Marcus arrived, animated, raising his voice this time. Jason responded defensively, hands clenching at his sides. I paused in the hallway, listening. The discussion was clearly about the business, about the looming $8,000 payment. Marcus urged urgency. Jason's responses were shaky. I could hear the tension in his voice, the panic beneath the veneer of authority. My pulse quickened, not from fear, but anticipation. The evidence of recklessness, the cracks in his confidence, were all I needed to ensure the legal strategy I had crafted would succeed. Later that night, Jason tried to discuss the situation with me indirectly. Marcus says we might have to delay some payments, he said, nervously fidgeting with his hands. Maybe you could help cover? I looked at him calmly, a cold, deliberate patience in my eyes. No, I said. The loan is your responsibility. You will handle it. His jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to persuade, but I remained silent. I had already planned every step. His pressure, his panic, his pleading meant nothing. The escalation he and Marcus had engineered only solidified my resolve. By the end of that week, I had finalized plans with my lawyers. The deed transfer was scheduled. Jason remained oblivious to the fact that every misstep, every secretive conversation, every escalation in tension had brought me closer to complete control. The house, the mortgage, the $900,000 loan, all of it would soon rest squarely on his shoulders. I had survived the storm of deception, and now I was ready to turn the tide. By the third week after discovering the forged loan, the house felt like a cage. Every room echoed with tension, every creaking floorboard a reminder of betrayal. Jason was walking around with a false calm, Marcus looming nearby like a shadow, and I felt the weight of every decision I had yet to make pressing down on me. For the first time, the exhaustion of vigilance seeped into my bones. I had been sleeping in short bursts, haunted by the image of that folder, the stark reality of my name on documents I hadn't signed. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining the worst-case scenarios. The bank foreclosing on our home, my father's disappointment, Jason's deception unraveling everything we had built. I could feel the walls of our house closing in, suffocating me with the magnitude of what I was facing. Even the smallest interactions became exercises in restraint. One evening, Jason leaned over the kitchen counter, discussing dinner plans, his face illuminated by the harsh glare of the overhead light. He smiled, unaware, trying to make casual conversation. I nodded and answered with clipped tones, but inside a storm raged. Rage, betrayal, heartache. Every memory of trust and love I had invested in him felt like a lie. I began questioning myself, a gnawing doubt I hadn't expected. Had I misjudged him before? Had I ignored warning signs? My mind replayed every argument about Marcus's business ideas, every discussion about finances, every subtle frustration he had shown when I insisted on prudence. Each memory now carried the weight of, I should have seen it. In the quiet of the night, I allowed myself to cry, letting tears fall freely for the first time. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I clutched the folder against my chest, imagining Jason reading the documents, oblivious to the power they held. I felt utterly alone. I had no allies in the house, no one who understood the gravity of what I had uncovered. Even my father, distant by an hour's drive, couldn't intervene directly. The isolation was suffocating, a cold reminder that I was solely responsible for the next moves, for protecting myself and preserving what was rightfully mine. The dark moment wasn't just fear of financial ruin, it was the realization of betrayal on a deeply personal level. Jason, the man I had shared 6 years of marriage with, the man I had trusted above all others, had chosen ambition and deception over love, partnership, and honesty. My anger coexisted with grief, a complex tangle of emotions that left me drained. Every plan I formulated in the daylight seemed fragile when I considered Jason's unpredictability, Marcus's scheming, and the potential legal hurdles. I felt powerless in those moments. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a stage set for a drama in which I was both actor and victim. I imagined the bank calling, the foreclosure notices arriving, the whispers of neighbors speculating about our collapse. My hands trembled as I touched the folder, the physical weight of betrayal tangible. And yet, within that despair, clarity began to form, like dawn breaking through storm clouds. I realized that the darkest moment was also a crucible, forging the strength I needed to act decisively. The power Jason and Marcus had wielded carelessly over our lives could be turned against them, not in vengeance, but in justice and protection. I began to see a path. Every careful step, every lawyer consulted, every document copied and hidden was a move toward regaining control. I allowed myself one final, silent acknowledgement of grief. I let the tears fall, the heartbreak sting, the weight of betrayal press upon me. Then I straightened, shoulders back, jaw set. I would not crumble in the shadow of their deceit. I would take action, deliberately enough that Jason would be left to bear the consequences of his choices. The dark moment was ending, not because the threat had passed, but because I had embraced the clarity and power born of it. By the time the first light of morning touched the Maple Ridge Drive lawn, I had made my decision. I would move forward, step by step, with precision. The loan, the house, the deception, all of it would be Jason's responsibility. I would reclaim my life, and when the dust settled, I would stand strong, unbroken, having turned betrayal into empowerment. The day I met with Patricia Chen, I felt the weight of the past 3 weeks pressing against my shoulders. Her office was on the 12th floor of a glass tower downtown, the sunlight glinting off sleek surfaces, casting long lines across the polished floor. The modern design felt almost clinical, yet in its clarity, I found a strange sense of calm. Patricia, in her early 50s, short gray hair framing a determined face, and wire-rimmed glasses perched on the bridge of her nose, greeted me with a firm handshake. Her presence radiated competence. This was the first person outside my family who knew the scope of Jason's deception, and I needed her precision. I laid out the photos of the loan documents, the forged signature, the mortgage agreements, and the deeds. Patricia studied them carefully, flipping pages, her eyes sharp and methodical. I could feel her assessing not just the paperwork, but me, the posture, the tension in my hands, the resolve in my eyes. Fraud is difficult to prove in a marriage context, she said finally, because technically, the bank may consider it a marital dispute. Even with a handwriting expert, the court might side with the assumption that both spouses were aware or should have been aware. She looked at me, direct. But there is a way to remove yourself from liability entirely. I listened intently as she outlined the second option, transferring sole ownership of the house to Jason through a quit-claim deed. It sounded deceptively simple, yet I knew the complexity it carried. Once the deed was transferred, Jason would become solely responsible for the mortgage and the $900,000 loan. He would believe he had gained full control, but in reality, he would shoulder all the risk. The clarity hit me like a jolt. This was the leverage I needed, the turning point that would shift the balance entirely. I spent 10 minutes in silence, letting the gravity of the plan settle. My chest tightened, but this time it wasn't panic. It was anticipation, a sharpened focus. I realized the moment I had feared, the confrontation, the uncertainty, the storm of deception, was now within my control. I could act deliberately, strategically, and with precision that would protect me completely. Patricia handed me a stack of forms explaining each step: the quitclaim deed, the bank's approval for mortgage transfer, timelines, and contingencies. I asked every question, no detail too small. I wanted to ensure that when Jason signed, he wouldn't suspect the true implications. Patricia's confidence reinforced my own resolve. I could see it then. I had moved from the reactive position of victim to the proactive position of strategist. Returning home, I kept my routine meticulously normal. Jason was working in his office, Marcus occasionally visiting, both oblivious to the fact that the leverage had shifted. I packed a few belongings each day: photo albums, important documents, keepsakes, moving quietly and deliberately, as if preparing for an evacuation that only I understood. My calm exterior masked the calculated steps I was taking. When the day of the deed transfer arrived, Jason signed without scrutiny. Patricia had framed it as estate planning, as a measure to simplify our financial responsibilities. He seemed pleased, commenting on finally having something entirely in his name. He had no idea that the $900,000 loan and mortgage were now his sole burden. I watched, internalizing the moment. My foresight and patience had created this shift of power. I had transformed betrayal into an opportunity, deception into leverage. I left the signing with a strange sense of relief and validation. The dark weeks of doubt, grief, and anxiety had culminated in a decisive victory that required no confrontation, no rage, only precision and patience. I had reclaimed control, not through impulsive action, but through careful, strategic execution. That night, I walked through the empty rooms of the house, now technically Jason's domain, and felt an odd mix of sorrow and liberation. Sorrow for what the marriage had been, what it could have been, and what trust had been broken. Liberation, because I had turned the crisis into empowerment. The home, once a symbol of shared life and love, had become a tool for reclaiming my autonomy. I realized, fully and irrevocably, that the turning point wasn't just the deed or the legal maneuvering, it was the shift within myself. From shock to strategy, from despair to precision, from victim to empowered agent of change. I had stepped into a role I didn't expect to inhabit, a protector of my own life, my own assets, and my own future. For the first time in weeks, I felt a calm, unshakable clarity. The storm outside, Jason, Marcus, the looming debt, was no longer dictating my life. I was moving forward on my terms, fully aware of every step and every consequence. The balance of power had shifted, and I was ready for whatever came next. By the time the quit-claim deed was finalized, the world Jason had built on deception began to crumble. For weeks, I had watched the tension building like a pressure cooker. Marcus urging urgency, Jason scrambling to meet looming obligations. Now, with full legal responsibility in his hands, the consequences of his reckless decisions landed squarely on him. The first visible sign came in the form of calls from the bank. $8,000 payments, missed deadlines, inquiries about deposits that were never made. Jason's confident veneer faltered. He paced the rooms of the house he now fully owned, phone pressed to his ear, muttering explanations that rang hollow even to him. Every missed call, every follow-up from the bank was a reminder. The burden he had tried to hide from me was now unavoidable. Marcus, too, faced the fallout. His grand crypto mining venture, which had seemed so promising, was unraveling. Equipment delays, faulty machinery, and the warehouse lease, expensive and non-refundable, combined to create a financial quagmire. I heard from mutual friends that the operation had failed completely, that deposits were gone, and the business had collapsed before it even began. Marcus's reputation, always tenuous, took a hit, while Jason bore the brunt of the financial responsibility. Inside the house, Jason's frustration grew. The energy that once animated him, his charm, his persistence, his subtle manipulation, had all evaporated. He called, he texted, he tried to negotiate, but the legal reality was unyielding. He couldn't shift responsibility back onto me. Every attempt to seek help or renegotiate with the bank highlighted his own poor judgment and lack of foresight. I had positioned myself beyond his reach, my wages, my savings, my credit, untouched. I, meanwhile, moved deliberately into the next phase of my life. My possessions had been quietly relocated over the prior 3 weeks. Important documents, clothes, cherished mementos, the tangible reminders of the life I had built. My father's house became my refuge, a safe harbor where I could breathe, strategize, and begin healing. Even as Jason's world descended into chaos, I found peace in the simple acts of daily life, preparing meals with my father, arranging furniture in my new apartment, setting routines for myself. One afternoon, a foreclosure notice arrived at the old house. I saw it online first. Maple Ridge Drive was in the bank's hands, scheduled for auction. The listed price was $650,000, far below its actual value. I allowed myself a fleeting smile. Jason, who had believed he had gained full control and autonomy, was now confronted with the full scope of the consequences he had tried to conceal. The loss of the house, the loan, the mounting stress. It was a reckoning I had meticulously anticipated. I hadn't intended this as vengeance. There was no joy in watching him struggle. My satisfaction lay in the justice of accountability, the natural unfolding of cause and effect. He had chosen deception over transparency. He had gambled with our lives, and now he had to bear the outcomes. Every missed payment, every frustrated call, every anxious meeting was the manifestation of choices he had made knowingly, deliberately. Meanwhile, I embraced my freedom. My apartment, modest but entirely mine, became a sanctuary. My father helped furnish it, couch, bed, dining table, each piece a symbol of stability and continuity. Work flourished. A raise came through, recognition of my diligence, my commitment, and my resilience. Every achievement, every quiet victory, reminded me of what was possible when life was steered by integrity, clarity, and foresight. Friends and family became support systems, not enablers of distraction or interference. My world, once shadowed by secrecy and betrayal, now offered a clarity that had been absent for months. Jason's attempts to contact me, calls, texts, pleas for assistance, were met with polite distance and firm boundaries. I had built walls of legal protection and personal resolve that he could not breach. The house, Maple Ridge Drive, eventually sold for less than the original loan. The bank absorbed the financial loss, but the impact was personal. Jason faced foreclosure, debt, and the collapse of his ambitions. Marcus returned to his apartment, burdened by the failed venture. Both were left to grapple with the consequences alone, their hubris and recklessness fully exposed. For me, the lessons were profound. I had learned to observe, to trust my instincts, to act decisively, and to protect my future. I had transformed a crisis into an opportunity for empowerment. I walked away from the marriage, not with bitterness or revenge, but with clarity, safety, and a renewed sense of agency. I sometimes drive past the old neighborhood, past the apple trees in the backyard where Jason and I once dreamed of a future together. The trees bear fruit still, vibrant and unbothered by human chaos. I think of the house as a closed chapter, a cautionary tale of trust and accountability. It belongs to him now, with all its burdens, while I carry forward with none of the weight. I don't seek vengeance. I don't relish failure. I seek justice in the balance of choices and consequences. Jason's collapse is a reflection of his own decisions, not my actions. I have regained my life, step by step, day by day, in the quiet power of measured action. The fallout is complete. Jason, Marcus, and the house are behind me. I move forward with clarity, with safety, and with the knowledge that I am fully capable of protecting what matters most: my life, my integrity, and my future. The first morning in my new apartment felt unreal. Sunlight spilled across the pale blue walls, catching on the small potted plants I had placed on the windowsill. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe without the weight of secrecy, betrayal, and fear pressing against me. The chaos of Jason's deception, the forged loan, the mortgage, the crumbling crypto venture was no longer my burden. I had stepped away from it all, carrying only the lessons and the clarity that had emerged from months of careful planning and emotional vigilance. Living with my father during the transition had been a gift. He never pressed me for details I wasn't ready to share. He simply provided stability, cooked meals, quiet company, and the kind of steadfast presence that reminded me life could continue, even after betrayal. Our dinners together became a ritual of healing, our conversations about woodworking projects and mundane daily matters a soothing counterpoint to the emotional storm I had endured. I thought often about the house on Maple Ridge Drive. The apple trees that had once been part of our shared dreams still bore fruit. The walls that had witnessed Jason's secrets and Marcus's schemes now stood empty, waiting for new occupants. I felt no bitterness toward the physical space, only a quiet acknowledgement that it was no longer mine, and I had no reason to cling to it. What mattered was what I had preserved: my integrity, my financial security, and my autonomy. The experience had reshaped me. I had learned to trust my instincts, to act deliberately, and to prioritize my own well-being without guilt. I had discovered a resilience I didn't know I possessed, the ability to navigate deception with clarity and precision. The dark nights, the moments of doubt, the fear and isolation, they had forged a stronger, wiser version of myself. To anyone watching this story unfold, the lesson is clear. Your trust is valuable, and your boundaries are sacred. Betrayal is painful, and recovery is not immediate, but measured action, clarity of mind, and careful planning can protect both your life and your peace. There is power in observation, in patience, and in the courage to act decisively when the time is right. As I prepare for the next chapter of my life, I carry with me the knowledge that stability and growth are possible, even after profound loss. The past has shaped me, but it does not define me. I am Emma, resilient, clear-eyed, and ready to move forward. And for the first time in a long time, I feel that the future is entirely mine to shape.